Hey cool cats, Roz and Neko here, and welcome to the Kitty Corner where I discuss Otome games that I've played, and today we're talking about 9 R.I.P. And I cannot wait to discuss in depth more about this game. Honestly, there's so much I want to talk about that I made a list of where to even start with this game. Because I was so excited for this game. I was so ramped up for it. I found this game on a whim. I didn't even know when it was released, and it was such a long story for me. Because I was recording reactions to games that were released in 2024 in Japan, and I just found this game trailer and I was just mesmerized by the colors of this game, and I was surprised that it was more of a spooky game, and I was finding out more that it was supposed to be horror and things like that. There was bloody handprints on the game cover and things like that. And I've said so much that I'm not a spooky person. I'm not especially a horror person and things like that. But this game looked so interesting. And I'll start with the fact that the basis of this game, story-wise, was that it's based on college fear. In Japan, the education system in Japan is very different from that of the States. In Japan, it starts off, there are only 3 years in high school in Japan because their education system is very different. They're very motivated to focus on in school and things like that. In high school, after high school classes, you're now going to cram school. And after cram school, you should be studying afterwards. Like, you're applauded for studying and working so hard and things like that. And once you're in high school, you're now applying to colleges and things like that. And if you're not going to college after that, if you're not going into career afterwards, it is frowned upon. It is looked so down upon and things like that. I don't think it is as much focused on due to current times, but I wouldn't quote me on that. So I can understand why that is a big focus on this game and why it can be so stressful. Even in the States, it is still such a big thing because that is still very important, even with the difference in education system and career base and things like that. Even in the States, it is such a big focus. But that was never a fear for me. My experience with the whole education and things like that, I won't dive too deep into it for me personally, but it was never a big fear for me. I just kind of flowed with it, and I encourage others to do the same. You know, if you're not ready to go to college, then explore your options. Go out into the field and shadow people in those career jobs, try out different things, volunteer, go for it. You have the world at your fingertips, and that's why it was just never a thing for me. That's why I could not connect with the character with this whole college thing. So that was just a small portion as to why I couldn't get into the game that much. The other thing is that the main character was a teenager, and that's just focusing on different types of characters. So the whole teen thing aside, but they kind of really harped in on this type of character, on this type of teenager or type or anything. But the fact that the character just made the same mistake over and over, or harped on trying to be a good person, or just doing the same thing over and over with different characters. Okay, I'm too scared to talk to my mom about my career choice. And once the love interest was like, oh, hey, ask them about your dad, they were like, oh, that solves my whole problem. I can now face my mom. Like, no, that's not how that works. It didn't make it believable. And then once that was solved, then the love interest then had their own problem. And the protagonist was always like, well, I'm going to have a chance of offing myself trying to help you solve your problem. It happened every single time, and that just did not feel realistic to me, because one, you have a chance of dying, and two, And a lot of those times, those choices that she would make would go against what the love interest would want to do. So it just really didn't make sense. And because she would do this in every single route, it became exhausting to see and to play through. So as I said before in my review, it was just a reused formula, and it was honestly nothing but exhausting. And honestly, it made me even question if this was a scary or creepy game at all. The second character that I played through was Kuhira. That was the only story that made me jump or honestly scream at all. Kuhira had a jump scare, terrifying looking creature in it. That was the only one. Otherwise, Hibiki's was really sad, and I can see that one being scary because he hung himself, and that was about it. No one else's was like creepy or anything else. The rest of them were just sad, and then the last characters that I played through in the spirit realm, nothing. It was not it. It wasn't honestly even creepy in the slightest, besides a story or two. Nothing. It wasn't even like creepy or anything. So what were they even trying to say? They were advertising it as horror or creepy. I'm honestly getting confused and frustrated on the last couple games that I've been playing recently, like Cafe Enchante, P Fiori, and some other games. Like, they're not advertising correctly on what exactly we're going to be getting and seeing and playing with these games. Like, I honestly want to see what I'm going to play. When you're handing me this game, am I actually going to be playing a scary game? Am I actually going to be playing a happy game? I want to know what I'm getting into. I want to know what I'm actually getting. If you're handing me this game and it's cutesy, but it's actually going to be scary at the other end, just please tell me that. And then I want to know what I'm actually going to get into. I want to know what kind of fun I'm getting into. But besides that, getting into a bit of more of the ghost stories, getting a bit more into the characters, it was interesting to see that there was a dynamic or some kind of connection between each characters. Focusing first on the ghost stories between Kuhira and Hibiki, it was interesting to see that they had a connection. The connection being that, hey, they were connected because they died in a specific way. And that they were actually a flip between each character. Kuhira looked like he was brave, but he actually wasn't, because he was afraid of ghosts. That was pretty disappointing, especially since he's like the main option, I guess. Don't know why. He is hot, but that's about it. And it was disappointing to appear brave, but you're not. And Hibiki's, though, he wants to be brave, and he is, but poor sweet boy. Poor sweet boy. He was my first crush in the game, though. When I do a natural playthroughs, I love it because Hibiki was my first crush. But he didn't make it through the end for me. But that's their connection, is that in the story, they both died in a specific way, and one is brave, one looks brave, but he's not. And Hibiki is brave, but he doesn't think he is, and that was an interesting twist in there. Moving on to urban legends, is that they're best friends, Senna and Koyo. But Senna is actually the sweet one, and Koyo, he has a roundabout way of being nice, but he's not really direct at it at all. And I thought he was a tsundere, Koyo, but he's actually not. Senna was actually pretty cool, I actually thought, is that he wanted to be a star, but he's not, because unfortunately he passed away. So he just wanted to be an urban legend, which I thought actually was pretty cool. I thought that was actually pretty sweet. And his story didn't make sense to me, though, that the heroine didn't want him to be an urban legend. So I feel like whether you got the good end or the bad end for him, it still worked out. Because if you're with him, you get to be with him. But if you're not, he gets to be an urban legend, which I still think is pretty nice, to be honest. But anyway, continuing into the other realm, the enemies dynamic is always flippin' fantastic. It was one of the best stories, honestly, because Saya is a hopeless romantic and he's flippin' hilarious the whole time. And he's such a sweetie pie. I could just not going through his route. I felt so bad for him, and I just couldn't, to be honest. I just couldn't. And Me is flippin' hilarious, and he's so adorable when you go down his route. And the boy has so many CGs. How he's not on the box cover art, to be honest, and how this couldn't be the main story, I just couldn't. I just couldn't. And in the spirit realm, going into that, it was so good because you actually get a group of characters that actually stayed together. They actually like stayed together and interact, which is so good. And I'm gonna come back to all these characters in just a second. But in the spirit realm stories, you have Yukimaru, whose Otome Kitten says that he's a Genki. I can't remember if it was, I'm sorry, I can't remember if it was Otome Kitten or Blurty. A Genki character, but I don't see it because he's so happy all the time, and I love him for that. Genkis have like the sad past, and they're trying to make everyone else happy, but they're trying to cover up their own sadness. Yukimaru's different. Yukimaru's like, yeah, I have a sad past. I acknowledge that. But I'm trying to take that sad past and make something out of it. That's what he's doing with it, and that's what I admire so much about him. I feel like you rarely ever find someone ever that actually does that. It is amazing. A character change and character development. That's what I adore about him. Kuharu is a tsundere through and through. And that's what I don't like about him. Tsunderes have never been my thing. Usually male ones. I don't recall any female ones, but I think I'm usually better with them. I don't know why. Toka, on the other hand, I don't know how to categorize. I feel different about him. I adore him, and like in the little like short form, I hate him in the older form. Hate him. But I love the group dynamic that they have, and I'm going to explain why in a minute. So, I did not know how to interpret this whole 9 R.I.P. game because I was so disappointed, mostly because of the protagonist and the reused story formula that they kept using over and over and over. And I didn't understand why it was so different. Part of it was because lack of character interaction. And I was so disappointed about it. My favorite stories were in Spirit Realm because there were 3 characters and they constantly interacted. My second favorite was Other Realm because Saya and Minimi constantly bounced off each other. And then the other 2 were kind of meh because in Urban Legends, Senna and Koyo already had an established relationship. You couldn't pull more character interaction or more character out of each of them because they were already done. They already had a relationship and they didn't really interact with each other. And in the last one, Ghost Stories, they barely interacted with each other. So what do you have left to do? And then I read Otome Kitten's blog, her review of 9 R.I.P. And she pointed out that this game is highly character driven. It is highly character driven game. Highly character driven story based. And that's when I realized, you know what? I personally don't like these kind of games and these kind of stories. When you have a game that is so focused on just the character with the protagonist, you have very little character pull out of the love interest. Because the only thing you get to see out of them is just how they interact with the heroine. There's only so much you can do. Now, I'm going to go back to the spirit realm. And let's just say, because I like him a lot, let's focus on Yukimaru. Yukimaru with the protagonist. You got to see him act a little bit silly, a little bit helpful with the protagonist. But when you added him with Koharu, you got to see him be funny with someone who was more of a straight man. And with Toka, you got to see him be more firm with someone who's more dangerous. You did not get to see that with the protagonist. And when you saw him get involved more in, I can't remember which story that was, but I think it was in Urban Legends when she was asking for help in a different route. You got to see how much more helpful he was in a different route and be like more silly and stuff. This is why bringing in other characters, you can see how much more personality is pulled out of a character and why that is so much more important and how much more it makes. If it was a fan fiction or a one-shot where all you want is just a straight love story, hit happy ending, bam, that's fine. But it doesn't really work as well. And I say yet again, if you tell me that this is character driven, a story focused one-shot, and this is what I'm getting into, then yeah, I'm all for it. Tell me what I'm getting into. I can enjoy it better and I know what my expectations are. But if I have to set my expectations low for every single game that I come across, then what's the point of a trailer? It's a struggle. I don't know where to set my expectations for a game. Then I don't really know what to expect from a trailer. What's the point of them? But I guess this is where I will wrap up the Kitty Corner. I am unfortunately disappointed with such high expectations with what little the trailer showed, with expectations of it being at least spooky, and it's not. It being a great story because of all the spookiness, and it wasn't. Very wonderful cast of characters. I just wish I could have seen more interaction among them. And that's about it. There is a second game coming out. I don't know what to expect with it. I can't remember what kind of game it is. If it's like a follow-up from their original games. If it's like a fan disc or anything. If anybody could let me know down in the comments. And especially the difference between a fan disc and that other kind of game. There is a major difference and I can never remember it to save the life of me. I would really appreciate it. Let me know down in the comments below. And let me know what you thought of this game. I would love to hear it. But otherwise, I'll see you cool cats next time. Yeah. Bye-bye.